Honest to God, I was willing to play devil's advocate for this movie, and I guess I'm still gonna play devil's advocate for this movie, but not to the same extent that I was expecting. Only 2 months ago, Disney put out the live-action remake of Snow White, a movie that was just dead on arrival. Between its millions and millions of controversies and its unnecessarily high budget of somewhere between 240 to $270 million. It shouldn't come as much of a surprise that this movie ended up being a box office bomb. On top of the movie itself being bad, so it's not like, oh, it didn't deserve to bomb, it's actually an underrated hidden gem. Well, luckily for Disney, that won't matter, because 2 months later, they put out their live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch. A movie that, whether you like it or not, will be massively successful at the box office. I never bought into the whole thing of like, oh, Snow White bombed, that means Disney's gonna stop making live-action remakes. I never bought into that because I knew this movie was gonna be inevitably successful. This movie was gonna completely undo all of the damage that the Snow White remake had done. In its opening weekend alone, this movie was able to make more money at the box office than the Snow White remake has done in its entire lifespan. You gotta admit, it's really fucking surreal seeing Disney go from having a box office bomb to $1 billion movie in the span of only 2 months. I've got to admit it. I thought this movie didn't look all that terrible from the trailers. I thought the trailers made the movie look decent. Obviously, it wasn't going to be anywhere near as good as the original animated movie from 2002, and maybe its existence isn't really all that necessary. But you know what? The movie didn't look that terrible from the trailers, surprisingly. And seeing how this is a live-action Disney remake we're talking about, that's a pretty big fucking deal. Even though I had no idea how this movie would have turned out, I just knew it was going to be massively successful. I knew there were several advantages to this movie that the Snow White remake didn't have. It really shouldn't come as much of a surprise why this movie is doing successful while the Snow White remake bombed. Number 1, this movie has far more appeal towards millennials and Gen Z, given the fact that it's a remake of a movie from the early 2000s. You look at the live-action remakes of the Disney Renaissance era movies, and with the exception of Mulan and The Little Mermaid, all of these movies have been massively successful at the box office, even though they're not very good movies. And this is because of the nostalgia that people feel for the original movies. The Lion King is one of the most beloved Disney movies of all time, one of the most beloved movies of all time in general. It's not really surprising that a remake would end up making a lot of money at the box office, regardless of the quality of the actual film itself. This cannot happen with Snow White, because Snow White is a remake of a really old movie from the 1930s. It doesn't have that nostalgia advantage that Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast had. It doesn't have much of an appeal towards millennials or Gen Z. I guess it's not impossible for millennials or Gen Z to grow up with the original Snow White, but I doubt they really grew up with it. I doubt there were that many millennials or Gen Z that grew up with this movie when compared to like The Lion King or The Emperor's New Groove or anything like that. Any of the Disney movies from the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. I don't think there's anyone out there that has that much nostalgia for the original Snow White. Or at least I don't think there's anyone out there that has that much nostalgia for the original Snow White that is still alive today. I'm sure this movie was a big hit in the retirement homes, but unfortunately for Disney, it wasn't a big hit in the theaters. Lilo and Stitch is a movie that needs no introduction. It is one of the most beloved Disney movies of all time. It was the only Disney movie that was successful when it initially came out in the 2000s. A lot of Disney's movies from the 2000s, The Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis the Lost Empire, Treasure Planet, etc., in retrospect, they're considered underrated classics, but these movies underperformed when they first came out. Lilo and Stitch in comparison was a successful film upon release, and as the years would go by, the movie would become more and more beloved. Now, I'm going to bring this up in advance. This will affect the way that I look at this remake. This will affect the way that I talk about this remake. but I haven't seen the original Lilo and Stitch in a very long time. Some of you might get mad at me for not rewatching the original movie before watching this remake, but in all fairness, I was too busy watching a movie franchise that I had surprisingly never seen until very recently. I unfortunately was not able to squeeze Lilo and Stitch into my schedule. I didn't think it would matter if I had rewatched the original movie or not before watching this remake, because I wanted to imagine this movie would just be exactly the same as the original. The Snow White remake was a controversial movie for a lot of reasons, one of the reasons being the many differences it made to the original film, and I expected this movie to be the complete polar opposite of that. Not only would this movie be the complete opposite of the Snow White remake in terms of box office performance, but it would also be the complete opposite in the sense that, like, the Snow White remake does a lot of things differently from the original animated movie, whereas this movie is just a by-the-numbers remake. It just plays it safe. It does the exact same things that the original animated movie did. Of course, that would then lead into the argument of, like, what's the point of remaking Lilo and Stitch if you're just gonna make the exact same movie again? But I feel like one could argue a remake that's just the exact same thing as the original, except not as good, is better than a remake that does too many things differently, and it completely ruins the original film. I was expecting Lilo and Stitch to be the former. I went into this movie expecting it to not be controversial at all like the Snow White remake. How the could you make Lilo and Stitch controversial? How could you screw up Lilo and Stitch that badly? Somehow, they managed to find a way. They managed to find a way to make Lilo and Stitch controversial. I'm still in disbelief just thinking about it. God damn. Now, as I mentioned before, I knew right from the get-go this movie was going to be massively successful, but I had no idea how successful this movie was truly going to be. On May 23rd, the opening day for the movie, I didn't go and see this movie. Instead, I saw Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. While I was in the lobby waiting for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, I saw there were tons and tons and tons of people that were wearing Stitch merchandise all over them. They had, like, you know, shirts of Stitch, they had, like, jackets, they had, like, plushies of him. It was crazy. And then the next day, I went to see the movie, and I saw the same thing. Tons and tons of people wearing Stitch merchandise. When I bought the tickets for this movie several days prior, yes, I actually did watch this in theaters. I didn't sail the 7 seas for it because I was that optimistic that this wasn't going to be terrible compared to the other live-action remakes. When I tried buying the tickets for this movie, it was almost completely sold out. Like, almost every seat was taken, and this was like the biggest auditorium in the theater. That, combined with the large amount of people wearing Stitch merchandise in both of my movie theater trips, was my sign that, yeah, this movie was going to be successful. This thing was going to make $1 billion whether I liked it or not, regardless of the quality of the movie itself. But I think I've delayed the inevitable long enough. I'm going to start talking about the movie itself and what I thought of it. It shouldn't really come as much of a surprise, but this isn't a very good movie. But I will say this about it. It is significantly better than the live-action Snow White remake, and I know it's kind of redundant to compare the two movies because they have nothing in common with each other, but it's also better than the worst movie of 2025, Hurry Up Tomorrow. I mean, it's not hard for a movie to be better than Hurry Up Tomorrow, but I don't care. As soon as I finished watching this thing that I'm still not sure if I should even refer to this as a movie, honestly. As soon as I finished watching Hurry Up Tomorrow, I was like, okay, I don't care how bad this Lilo and Stitch remake will be, there's no way it's gonna be worse than Hurry Up Tomorrow. Yeah, okay, sure, the Lilo and Stitch remake is corporate slop, but you know what? At least it's corporate slop with a understandable, comprehensible storyline, and that alone makes it significantly better by default. Finally, as far as live-action remakes go, this is probably the best one. This is the Citizen Kane of live-action Disney remakes, and it's still not very good. I say that while also acknowledging the many questionable, controversial changes this movie makes to the original storyline. Allow me to acknowledge a few of the good things about this movie. Number 1, Stitch is adorable in this movie. They perfectly nailed the design for this character. They perfectly nailed this translation of this character into live action. Now, one thing that a lot of the live action Disney remakes are frequently criticized for are their insistence on taking things that used to be cartoony and fun and making them super ultra realistic for no reason at all. They did this with The Lion King, they did this with The Little Mermaid, they did this with Snow White, and they didn't do it with Lilo and Stitch, thankfully. I know there are a lot of people that hate this movie because of the changes it makes to the original movie, and that's fine, but I'm just simply pointing out that it could have been so much worse. They could have very easily redesigned Stitch. They could have very easily given him a more photorealistic design, akin to like any of the characters from The Lion King or the Seven Dwarfs from Snow White. But instead, no, they keep him cartoony. He's still cartoony. He is a little bit more realistic in the sense of like, yeah, you could see like his fur, for example. But generally, he's still cartoony. He's still adorable, which I think is for the better. I'm sure Disney is patting themselves on the back for making this decision, because God only knows how things would have turned out if they gave Stitch the same treatment that they gave to like Sebastian and Flounder from The Little Mermaid. Listen, we all lived through Ugly Sonic, we all lived through the Minecraft movie, we all lived through Shrek 5's teaser. This could have been even more catastrophic than any of those combined. All of those people that went to go and see this movie, all of those people that were wearing Stitch merchandise watching this movie, they would not have gone to see this movie if they changed Stitch's design. Earlier, I talked about the advantages that this movie had over the Snow White remake. I talked about how this movie has a bigger appeal towards millennials and Gen Z because they actually grew up with the original movie, unlike Snow White. But there's also the fact that they kept Stitch's design adorable. And anyone should know by now, Stitch is one of the most beloved Disney characters of all time. Arguably the most beloved Disney character outside of like the core characters like Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, etc. I go into any store, I will find Stitch merchandise easily. I will find shirts, I will find plushies, I will find just anything with Stitch on it. In any store that I go to, it doesn't matter which store. Everyone that went to go and see this movie, everyone that's going to go and see this movie, all of these people wearing Stitch merchandise that have either already seen this movie or are going to see this movie, they would not go and see this movie if they changed Stitch's design, if they gave him a more photorealistic design. They would not see the movie because of that. This would become the most boycotted movie ever in existence easily, man. There'd be protests and riots happening all over the world if they changed Stitch's design. This would be the one thing that would unite everyone on every side together. Disney adults, anti-woke weirdos, animationist cinema cultists, normal people. Everyone would be joining forces. Everyone would be putting aside their differences to team up together to criticize Disney for changing Stitch's design. This would be the one thing that would make Disney adults and anti-woke weirdos team up together. Two sides of the same coin, and they would be joining forces together. I am glad we do not live in that timeline, and I want to imagine Disney is glad as well. The internet lets Disney get away with a lot of different things. They would not let them get away with up Stitch's design. Simple as that. It's kind of the exact same thing with the How to Train Your Dragon remake, which I know that's DreamWorks and not Disney, but it still has the same advantages that the Lilo and Stitch remake has that the Snow White remake didn't have. I'm not defending this movie. I'm not saying this movie is going to be good. I'm not saying its existence is justified. I'm just simply pointing out Yeah, it's not going to be really surprising if this movie ends up being successful. There are reasons for it. It has that massive nostalgia advantage amongst millennials and Gen Z that grew up with the original movie in 2010. And they kept Toothless cartoony. They didn't change the design of Toothless or anything like that. He still looks cartoony. He looks exactly like he did in the original animated movie. I know some people are going to ask, okay, then what's the point of remaking the movie if he's still going to look cartoony? But I guarantee you, if they changed it Toothless to look more like a generic photorealistic dragon, there would be protests going on, there'd be riots going on. You don't want that, okay? Just take it as it is, okay? Take it as it is. I'm not saying you have to like it. I'm just saying it could have been so much worse, trust me. When you take into consideration the fact that earlier this year, we got a movie with a nearly $300 million budget that has CGI that is somehow on par with the Polar Express, a movie that came out all the way back in 2004. That's when you look at these two and you realize, oh, they're not that bad actually. They're pretty fine actually. They're okay. I don't have a problem with this. I'm just saying. Okay, so they perfectly adapted Stitch into live action. I'll give the movie credit for that. Sadly, I cannot say the same thing for the other two alien main characters in this movie. Pleakley and I don't remember his name. Jumba, I don't remember what his name was, okay? Again, I haven't seen the original movie in a long time, don't get mad at me. In which their live-action renditions fall into the uncanny valley territory that a lot of live-action Disney remakes fall into. Now, something else that I want to say about the movie that's positive is, I never thought I would ever say this for a live-action Disney remake, but there is a little bit of heart in this movie. There is a little bit of soul in this movie. I honest to God cannot believe I'm saying this, but yes, this is a live-action remake that does have a little bit of soul in it. Not a lot, mind you, but there is a little bit that's there. I guess Lilo and Stitch is just inherently a charming franchise, and so they would have to try really f***ing hard to make Lilo and Stitch completely 100% soulless. I was genuinely surprised that I was actually laughing a few times in the movie. There are a couple funny jokes in the movie. There is a little bit of heart in this movie. Not much, of course, but there is significantly more heart in this movie than in any of the other live-action Disney remakes. Again, this movie makes a lot of questionable changes from the original. It doesn't have much of a reason to exist, and it is obviously nowhere near as good as the original, but you know what? At least it has a little bit of heart in it. It has a little bit of soul. I'll give it that. So what other positive things could I say about this movie? Nothing. That's pretty much it, as a matter of fact. I have been a lot more positive towards this movie than usual for a live-action Disney remake, but make no mistake, this isn't a very good movie, and there are problems with this movie. So let's go over those problems, shall we?